Dan and Amy. And Amy, the McLaughlin Group was a staple for me growing up. I would have to leave 5:30 Mass right after communion to get back home to watch it at 6:30 on PBS. That was Chicago time here for so many years. John McLaughlin passed away yesterday at the age of 89 after an incredible run and an incredible life.
Yeah, 32 years he never missed a show. And the day after he missed his first show, he passed away. I mean, that is dedication.
Well,
that is loyalty to his cause and to the American people.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the McLaughlin Group which became popularized. It was so popular that it demanded an SNL parody. But it was also, he did an interview show called One-on-One with John McLaughlin. These were really great, probing, insightful interviews. This was a very well-read, very intelligent dude, PhD from Columbia, ordained Jesuit priest.
Wow.
I mean, this was a man of letters in addition to kind of being, because mostly of Dana Carvey, turned into kind of a popular cartoon character as when he was first parodied, or near the time he was first parodied after the 92 primary campaign where Pat Buchanan challenged King George Herbert Walker Bush, before returning to the group, and that was the setup for this parody.
Before we proceed, we welcome back our returning warrior, Pat Buchanan.
Thanks, John.
Issue 1. Bush trounces Buchanan. Super Tuesday is Clobber Buchanan Day. Now that Bush has scraped Buchanan off his shoe, will his platform be affected even one iota by the views of Pat Buchanan? Pat Buchanan!
Well, John, I think I made significant inroads into the Republican...
Wrong, Freddie Baumstarr!
Well, while I think Pat ran a decent campaign...
Wrong, more Tony Maroney!
Well, I don't think Pat has anything to be ashamed of.
Wrong! He had no impact whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is like wildly hyperbolic, but I love the names he came up with. Morton, Teeny Tiny Tabletop, Kondraki, and all the Jack Germondo, and of course, Freddie the Beetle Barnes, the executive editor of the Weekly Standard, who joins us now. Fred Barnes, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good. Glad to be here. And that wasn't hyperbolic.
No,
that's right.
No exaggeration.
That was normal.
That was documentary style.
Dana Carvey was great, and you said correctly, of course, that what a bright and educated guy John McLaughlin was, but he also loved the Dana Carvey caricature of him.
Oh, good.
That's what's funny. That's what I was going to ask you, is like what you guys, not just John McLaughlin, but the whole panel, all the panelists thought about being parodied. I mean, I think Mike Myers did a pretty good Fred Barnes, but what you thought about the SNL parodies generally.
I thought they were hilarious. I hear more about them these days, and they go back, to the 80s, 90s, than I do about actual shows.
Right.
I mean, people remember those. I think they remember John McLaughlin, as I think you suggested, Dan, based on the Dana Carvey caricature.
Well, how did
the
John...
caricature wasn't that far off.
Well, how did John McLaughlin change the political landscape of television and cable news?
No, I just think he was the most important guy in any of these political talk shows. He just changed everything. I mean, there were a couple of them before that, but they were mainly interview shows. They weren't fist fights and like rugby games or something. He really did change. Made it interesting. This was '82 when he started, and CNN had just begun. There was no Fox News or MSNBC or anything like that. There were just a few pretty unexciting shows. I mean, Firing Line was a good show with William Buckley, but that was an interview show, and it wasn't a struggle for dominance.
Well, right, and Firing Line, as much as I enjoyed that show, and in the debates as well, is more esoteric, where this was more the rumble and the rough and tumble of partisan politics. Certainly there were policy discussions, but it was in the context of electoral politics.
Yes, exactly. That's right. And they were some of the discussions could get quite fiery. People would get angry. One of my goals in being on the show was never to get angry, but I did a couple times.
Was John McLaughlin like the same way off air as he was on air? Was he always making you rate things between 0 and 10, 10 being metaphysical certitude, when you were just having a conversation off camera?
No, privately he was a lot worse.
Oh, really?
I'm kidding.
All right.
Privately, I got along with him well. It took some effort, and John was. Look, there was nobody like John McLaughlin I've ever met in my life, and not just because he was a Jesuit priest, but and considered himself a Jesuit priest just because he was in TV being a moderator of a popular show. He claimed he could still conduct weddings.
And probably on that show offer confession.
Boy, I'd never confess to him.
No.
But,
All right.
anyway, he was very much in charge. He did treat us like subordinates, but there was one other thing he did that was important to me and the Mort and Jack and Bob and everybody on the show. Pat already had Pat Buchanan already had from the beginning, was a well-known figure, and everybody knew who he was, and so you didn't need to create a caricature for him to make him an individual person. But he had to do it for the rest of us, and I'll have to say he achieved that. We were all individual people, and we had fans. I'd hear from people, telling me how they were rooting for me, and so it was more like some sort of a sports game or a golf match or something. But it was fun to do, and people would recognize you. For me, I was a Baltimore Sun, a political reporter in the Washington Bureau, and I was flattered when I was asked. It was a big step up, and I was glad to do it. Enjoyed doing the show, and got paid not much, but it would lead to getting speeches where you would get paid more.
There you go.
It was historical. So switching gears, today is the first day Donald Trump gets his national security briefing, and I want to know, do you trust him to not talk and to keep his mouth shut?
Yeah, probably not. Why would he?
Because he's supposed to.
Maybe Chris Christie and Mike Flynn can help. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been supposed to do a lot of these things that he hasn't managed to do. Look, he needs to do it here. He's got a couple of new campaign people. He's got Roger Ailes advising him on debates, and I hope advising him on just appearances when he gives a speech. But he really does. He's just going to have to discipline himself. He can't just shoot from the cuff. He thinks there was some secret that he had that if he just said something spontaneously, that's what attracted people, and maybe it did in the primary. But look, it was easy to stand out when you're running against 17 or 16 other people, because if you have a big personality, and he did. But it's a little different when you're in a presidential campaign, and the biggest issue in the campaign is whether you're fit to be president or not. I have to give Hillary Clinton credit. She's a terrible candidate, but she and her campaign have established that, with help from some Republicans, but have established that as the paramount issue at the moment.
Well, there may be an encouraging sign that he is finally getting that message, and I point to his rally in Wisconsin yesterday, where it was a rally setting, not a formal speech, but he gave a formal speech. That was certainly a speech that was written and crafted, his remarks. That was not off the cuff, and I thought he offered some fairly salient points about Hillary Clinton and Democrat policies' impacts on major cities like Milwaukee, and calling for the need for the peaceful regime change, and railing against the media donor complex and other such turns of phrases. I thought was effective.
Yeah. It was effective, and he did a speech the day before on terrorism and fighting it, ISIS and immigration, which was also done from a text and read from a teleprompter. It was a very good speech. He did it very well. Okay, that's 2 days in a row.
It's a start.
It's like
we'll
the old
take
Cubs.
anything.
Yeah, it's the old Cubs winning streak. Let's just take what you can get at this point. But just sticking on the Trump campaign shakeup that we referenced, I wanted to get your assessment of Steve Bannon, because this is a very interesting individual. He had a huge profile piece in Bloomberg last year. He is the founding chairman of the institute that provided Peter Schweitzer the position and ultimately led to the publication of Clinton Cash, in addition to being kind of the co-founder of the Breitbart news outlet. What does the retention of Steve Bannon in an executive senior campaign role say to you? What kind of impact is he going to have?
That's a very good question, and I've never met the man. Obviously, Trump has known him a long time. We'll just have to see. I hate to say that, but I do read the Breitbart site, and if I were Paul Ryan and some of the other Republicans in the leadership in Congress, I'd be a little wary because some of the stories that they would have on Breitbart with Bannon as the head of Breitbart were just incredible, calling Paul Ryan, saying he was for open borders and he was treasonous and because he was for free trade and all these things. I'm sure when Paul Ryan saw that this had happened, that his eyebrows were raised. So I don't know. We'll see how Bannon works. Look, I know Kelly Conway very well. She's a great pollster, very smart, and will be a real addition to the campaign. I hope Trump is willing to listen to her.
Well, what do you think happened with Paul Manafort? I mean, it sounds like he went the way of the Corey Lewandowski did. There was friction between the two.
Well, he's still around.
Well, he's still around, but according to CNN, he's not going to be. It's just a title, and he's not going to be having daily interaction with Donald Trump as he has been the past few months.
Yeah, I think that's right. Trump since the convention has done very poorly. How many weeks is that now? 3 or 4? He's been sinking. So what do? You can't fire the candidate, so you bring in new people to advise him and run the campaign. I don't know what else Trump could have done. I mean, obviously, disciplining himself is one thing, but you bring in new people, and he's got 3 new ones. Don't underestimate the role that Roger Ailes can have here. For one thing, Ailes now has time on his hands, but Ailes was. I knew him when he was a Republican media consultant. He was the best in the business.
Yeah.
And remember in 1984, after the first presidential debate with Mondale, when Reagan was so terrible, who came to advise him before the second debate and get him and help Reagan get his confidence back? And Reagan had that great performance in the second debate, and that was the end of the campaign. Ailes is important here.
Does Ailes get the credit for the "I'm not going to hold your youth and inexperience against you," Senator Mondale?
No, that was all Reagan. I think it was a line that had been in some movie back in the 30s or 40s or something.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Oh.
And Reagan really knew how to do that. I mean, that was brilliant.
Question:
Just like that one line, and the campaign was over.
Yeah, it really was. Question about just the future. Constitution of the Republican Party generally. There was a very interesting piece in Politico, some survey research that was done by a public policy professor, Justin Guest, at George Mason University, part of a kind of a broad study of Trump supporters. And he finds that 65% of those surveyed, kind of the cross-section of Trump supporters, would be open to a third party. Pointing out that there's greater support for a third party than there is for necessarily Trump as the candidate. And it seems to reinforce this idea that Trump is part of a movement and he's just the vehicle for it right now. But that movement isn't going away regardless of what happens to Trump in November.
Yeah, no, it isn't going to go away. But look, I don't think Trump's going to go away either. If he wins, he obviously won't go away. But if he loses in something that's not a landslide, I think he'll still be around. He'll want to be the leader of this group, and as long as he's there, I don't think anybody's going to come in and take it away from him. And you're going to have the problem for Republicans is they're going to have a very divided party. And if Trump, I just think if Trump comes close but loses, then you're going to be those people are going to be as Sean Hannity has already said, they're going to be blaming all the other Republicans who didn't back Trump for losing the election, for losing the White House. And it's the party is going to be very, very divided. Just in all the primaries. Remember, I was always struck when this question was asked of Republican voters in the primary. Do you think you've been betrayed? Betrayed, that's a strong word. Betrayed by your Republican leaders. And in every primary, it was always 50% or more.
Yeah.
Said, yes, we've been betrayed.
Yeah. All right. He is Fred Barnes. He's the executive editor at the Weekly Standard. Also, you want to check out his latest book on Jack Kemp, the bleeding heart conservative who changed America, that was done by Freddie the Beetle Barnes and Morton Teeny Tiny Tabletop Contracting.
You can't do that.
Yeah, Morton.
Fred, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your reflections on John McLaughlin as well. Appreciate it.
All right, good. Thanks.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.